Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com Roundtable, brought to you by Techstrong and Tricentis. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel for you ahead. First, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. Today's session is, in fact, being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, or you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, and we really hope that you do, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. That's also where you'll find the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members, or maybe just let us know from where you are joining. And of course, before we close, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around for the duration of today's program. So welcome everyone to DevOps Unbound. This episode, report on AI-Augmented DevOps. And I'm joined by Clint Sprav, Director of Product Marketing at Tricentis, Kosuke Kawaguchi, creator of Jenkins and co-CEO of Launchable, Mitch Ashley, CTO of Techstrong Group and Principal of Techstrong Research, and Mike Rothman, Chief Strategy Officer for Techstrong Group and GM of Techstrong Research. So Clint, Kosuke, Mitch, Mike, thank you all so much for joining me today. Mitch, do you want to go ahead and take it from here?
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Cody J. Brown. Appreciate you kicking us off there in style. And a special thanks to our producers today, both Lanier and Cody Lanier and Jody, said similarly to Cody.
Mitch, you will pay for that later.
Doesn't it? Well, I was trying to do a good thing there. So no, because I wanted to mention that this DevOps Unbound is a series that we do bi-weekly. It's been a long-term series we've done now for a couple of years. And Tricentis has been a sponsor of this from pretty early on. And what's interesting about this is Tricentis as a company with Techstrong Group has been really more of a partner in putting on the content for this. And we have a little bit of a special episode today because it's both live. It's our roundtable version of it, which we do once a month in addition to our bi-weekly recordings. And then, but it's also about some research that Tricentis asked Techstrong Research to take on around AI and AI-Augmented DevOps, which is our topic, of course. So we're going to get into that. We have a free report. I want to mention that right up top. If you go and look at the chat, it says free report. Click on that, baby. That'll download the report for you. We're going to be talking about that, but also kind of intermixing with some discussion about AI-Augmented DevOps in general and AI in the role in DevOps. Where are we making inroads? Where we might go next? All that kind of thing. So that sets up what our conversation is today. So let me begin by asking our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our topic. Mike, since we're talking about research today, why don't you start us out? First, introduce yourself. Tell us
sure. I'm Mike Rothman. I am Chief Strategy Officer of Techstrong Group, as well as General Manager of Techstrong Research. I'm the principal, or certainly one of the authors on the report. So I'll have a few things to talk about relative to that, and a 30-plus year security professional. So I kind of look at it from, I don't want to say old guy perspective, but certainly a experienced individual who's kind of seen a lot of the trials and tribulations of technology evolution over the last couple of decades. And it's a really interesting time to start thinking about how we can apply a lot of these new capabilities to the problems that we're dealing with. Obviously, we'll kind of hone in on DevOps, but I think it's really an exciting time to be in technology right now.
Excellent. Kosuke, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So hello, I'm Kosuke. I'm based in San Jose. I'm probably best known as a guy who invented Jenkins, and that was at this point 15 years ago. So I've been working on Jenkins for quite some time. I built the company CloudBees around it, and then as I started watch this automation sprawl in the software development, I felt pride, but I started thinking about, okay, so what's the next here? And I thought, okay, there's all this automation producing lots of data, but unlike manufacturing, we often like to use as the lighthouse of where we're trying to go. We are not really using that data to make our development process more effective. And I'll hear from the practitioner all the time, like why they can't get the organizational support. So I thought, okay, this seems like my next mission. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years in a company called Launchable.
Well, Kosuke, thank you for Jenkins, this first tool and I'm sure many other people used on our DevOps journey. So
Thank you.
You've already had a major impact in the industry and excited about what you're doing at Launchable as well. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Clint, repeat guest, good to be with you again. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, definitely. Hey, everyone. My name is Clint Sprav, Director of Product Marketing with Tricentis. I primarily focus on our DevOps messaging and positioning, also the PMM for some of our emerging products coming through. I'm based in the Fort Worth, Texas area. Been with Tricentis about 2 years, been in the testing industry for a ridiculously long amount of time. Worked for several testing vendors over the years, most of the usual suspects. And one of the reasons that I was really happy to participate in this particular roundtable is that we're really seeing the evolution of quality across the board. And we're seeing some of those things that a lot of the vendors promised like over 20, 25 years ago. You're starting to, to see it actually, to actually happen within the industry itself. So really happy to be here. And again, as I mentioned off camera, just being in the presence of KK and what he's done just for DevOps and just software development in general. So this is just great for me. So I'm just super excited. I'll try not to be a super fanboy and participate.
Be a fanboy.
but it's kind of hard to do that. But so yeah.
He's the nicest guy and most humble. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you, Clint. So let's get into our topic. Just kind of refreshing an old saying, Yogi Berra. AI, everybody's talking about it, but nobody does anything about it. Well, people are doing something about it. They are applying AI to DevOps and doing some interesting things. So let's kick off, Mike. Why this report? Why this topic? Why now? We hear a lot about AI. And of course, I think in everyone's mind is like, when is it real? When is it market hype? All that kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about why you kicked off this research with
Yeah, you bet. And I think a lot of it gets back to kind of the ethos of Techstrong Research, which is, we really want to be looking forward, right? We want to be thinking about where stuff is going. There are a lot of other folks out there that'll be happy to tell you where things have been. They may do, kind of funky quadrants and kind of wavy things and those kinds of reports. But what we don't really see is a lot of folks that are out there trying to get a sense of when. Right. We've talked about AI for a long time. I think somebody in the chat mentioned, 20 to 25 years we've been talking about, kind of a lot of these technologies. And that's right. So what we try to do with Techstrong Research is, obviously leverage all of you folks, right? All of our audience that's out there and have you share your perspectives with us, have you give a sense of where you're at relative to the evolution of a lot of these, main trends. And obviously AI and the DevOps, the intersection of AI and DevOps is what we studied here. And I think what's interesting is we had a couple of high level, kind of findings, right? And that's on the executive report the executive summary of the report. So we'll plug that a number of times right up there in your chat. So you can grab it, kind of and read it right now. But really what, it comes down to three, kind of main high level conclusions that we drew from the report. The first is there's a great expectation that AI is going to dramatically impact favorably, right? DevOps. So that's one of the things that we took away is that, again, a lot of folks may not be there yet. They may be, kind of early on in their process, either with DevOps or with AI. But the expectation is that they are going to feel and get some, very specific, very tangible benefits from, using and leveraging AI within their DevOps environment. The second one is that DevOps and that AI within DevOps, kind of motions can really impact favorably a lot of the business and technical challenges that we face with DevOps, especially around people, right? And it's like, you talk to 5 people and you go, oh, how many of you folks, have open recs on your team? All 5 of them, right? Oh, how many folks have too many people? Nobody ever says that, right? So we still have a skills gap, whether you're looking at it from security or ops or development. We don't have enough people, right, to do the things that we need to. So we have to leverage the machines more effectively to help us become more efficient, improve effectiveness and the like. And that came across loud and clear, from the data that folks do expect AI and DevOps to really have a significant impact on what they do from a DevOps standpoint. And the third high level thing will be music to Clint's ears for sure, is that a lot of the folks believe that AI will have the biggest impact on testing. Right? There's a whole mess of stuff you have to do as you scale up your environment. Just the number of moving pieces. What do you focus on? How do you make sure you have proper coverage? I mean, all of these things really, really kind of explode when you're scaling out, a DevOps environment. And we don't really have a choice but to leverage the machines, right? Leverage a more analytical capability to be able to keep up and keep pace with, kind of those aspects. So at the top line, that's what our study found, is that, again, folks are expecting big things, right? They think that they can address a number of the technical and business challenges that were here, and it will have the most significant impact on the testing aspect of the DevOps infinity cycle.
KK, jump in.
Yeah. So when I first saw this report, I'm like, oh my God, I got to show this to my investors. And then, it's like, well, it always helps when other people are saying the same thing. So that was great. But at the same time, this almost, at places, I felt like this gotta be too good to be true. So I'm looking forward to having those more conversation there. But in some sense, the trajectory, the things I learned with Jenkins is like, okay, you start to drive a lot more computers to make ourselves productive. And at some point, the number becomes too much for humans to interact with them directly. So this only is a natural directions to having like a layer that separates you from all the gory details that's going on. So directionally, it makes sense. Where are we today? Well, that's where things kind of gets interesting, I think.
Yeah, and I was really interested in the fact that when you talk just really how it all comes together, especially in the testing space when you start talking about those skills gap, right? So we've gone from those that are pushing heavily on the programming aspect to low code, no code, and then how does AI affect that? Because what we see a lot, dealing with our customers and prospects is that many of them, they still have these large QA organizations, and they have folks that are the subject matter experts and business analysts, but they don't necessarily have the skills to really hone in on some of the areas where AI can actually, really help accelerate that. So it's an exciting time, an exciting future in seeing how this is really going to have AI-infused DevOps really improve not only just software development in general, but also accelerating quality across the board.
It's an interesting time too. There's a question that someone asked since I mentioned I've been doing Lisp and Prolog and expert systems going back to the 80s, though I haven't worked in AI my whole career. That's kind of why now. Is it because of all the compute that we have available to it? I mean, obviously, compute is infinitely better than it was in the 80s by a long shot, but it's, many factors. One of the things I threw out there is, it's compute, but it's more, I think more importantly, there's been huge advancements in machine learning algorithms. But I think the biggest factor is just the massive amount of data that unstructured machine learning can leverage as well as structured. But, now we have enough data to chew on to make some interesting connections, conclusions, relationships, all that kind of thing. What are all your perspectives?
Yeah, so exactly. I actually thought the another area that I had in so QA is clearly one area that's producing lots of data, and then which otherwise I wouldn't be picking this as an area of my startup. But I thought another area that's ahead in the DevOps space is actually ops, more in the operations, the monitoring, for example, like that, those I felt like there is an area that has like a lot more adoption of AI. Like these people have long forgotten. I mean, long gave up is the idea that they're going to be babysitting individual like components of the services. So it's certainly a mass and data game. So I feel like what makes it easy in the QA space is like we can point to these guys like, okay, when the data size or the scale of things you're dealing with grows beyond certain point, you just have to rely on these tools, and you don't have to invent the new things. Almost is kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I'll kind of look at it from a DevSecOps piece of it too, and really hit on, kind of what KK just said relative to, the operations side of things. But in again, for security, it was like, we didn't know what we should have been looking for, right? And the first evolution of any of the monitoring technologies was really looking for specific patterns, right? We call them signatures. Your AV, kind of your intrusion detection. I mean, all of these things were based upon patterns that you knew to look for. But the problem was the attackers didn't get that memo. Right? They're like, well, if you're looking for that, maybe I'll do something else. And we would have to wait to get popped by something, and then you could look for it. Right? That's obviously an inexact thing. So the ability to aggregate just scads of telemetry and data, and the ability to use these analytical techniques to infer relationships and patterns that we didn't know existed, that we didn't know to look for, that's really made all the difference in the world, right? So it was just, it really has been a technology thing. We couldn't aggregate the data in, kind of a scalable enough fashion. We didn't have the algorithms or the math to determine, kind of what these patterns were. And you bring both of those together and you're just like, a light bulb. And then, all the math people become data scientists and their salaries go up like 4x. And, it's a good time to be in data science, but it's really been enabled by a lot of the technology evolution that we've seen specifically around cloud.
Right.
Yeah, and you're also seeing the impact of only that test data or test data management along with security. And so now you're looking at, we've all heard the term DevSecOps, developer security, having developers do more security. So we're really seeing the influx of AI within those security tools as well. It's actually making that much smarter in terms of how do I manage, this massive amount of data and all these different security issues, whether I'm doing SaaS or DaaS or any other type of security testing. And that becomes really big. And I think what's really amazes me beyond this report is when we start looking at the impact of AI from just software development and some of the tools that are being developed by AWS, Google, and Microsoft in terms of helping developers write code using AI and making that much smarter and being able to kind of actually create applications, from existing code bases. So that all kind of dovetails into infusing that into how we develop software within a DevOps paradigm. So.
Excellent. Well, I think, Mike, maybe I'll jump to a promise to the audience: no slides. We are not doing slides. I hate slides. But what I will do is I'm going to do a little bit of screen sharing. There's some sections from the report. This is the report you can download from that link.
Right up there in the, pinned to the top of the chat.
That's weird. I'm pointing one or the other. I'm going to do a quick screen share. And there's a couple things on here I think would be worth highlighting. Mike, if you could touch on or at least kick off some conversation. Hopefully everybody see the report there on page 5, I believe it is.
Yeah.
We've got a nice interesting graphic here. I'm going to zoom in to get a little more perspective on it.
It is because, and again, I mean, I think that, and we got one of the questions in there was, what specifically are folks expecting and where's the impact? And we will certainly get there, right? We've got all sorts of different cuts of the data in the report. But, the thing, and again, in terms of really trying to look forward, right? And making the assumption that, kind of the folks that have spent more time doing DevOps really identify themselves as mature DevOps organizations. And we cut the data that way, right? So we asked them, where are you on this, DevOps evolution scale? Are you, kind of just getting started? Or and I forget what the four of them are, but mature DevOps was, kind of folks, basically self-identifying that they have a mature, stable, and productive, program in DevOps environment. So we just wanted to take a look at that, right? Just those folks that are most advanced in terms of their use of DevOps, and really to get a sense of, are you getting value, right? Are you finding that leveraging AI is useful, to help really streamline and work on your specific DevOps initiatives. And the data is the data, right? The data says 79% of the early, kind of those mature DevOps shops are finding value using AI. And again, you kind of say, well, that's kind of obvious, right? But it's not, because again, there's a lot of different areas where we can use advanced analytics. We can leverage a lot of the data and telemetry that we're getting there, but it doesn't always translate to real value within the organization, right? Within the process. So that's something that, again, I thought was very interesting, from the perspective of getting, kind of access to that data. So that was kind of the first thing we wanted to highlight, from that expectations standpoint, that the folks that have been doing this the longest identify themselves as the most mature, clearly state that, AI does add significant value, within their DevOps environment.
So this was actually one of the shocking numbers to me, because this kind of implies that these guys are already using AI-augmented DevOps tools, and I felt like, this is still a relatively minor fringe niche practice. So is this reflecting their expectations that they hope it would be useful? Like when they say find it useful, it sounds like they have already used it. I'm sorry, I guess you dropped off. So
no, I'm here. I just had to, I had to jump away.
Got it. Okay. Yeah,
No. So and that's really a great, kind of clarifying point, KK, is that again, so these folks that again identify as mature, right? So they're the most experienced on the DevOps side. At least some percentage of these folks, have and have started to use, kind of some of these AI tools within their process. So that's, kind of, and again, obviously there's, so much that we can do with a survey tool. So we didn't dig in and, kind of talk to each one of the 2,600 respondents. And we did have 2,600 respondents in the survey pool. So that was, again, a great response from that perspective. We can use things like significantly or statistically significant numbers and the like. But yeah, so it turned out that the folks that identified as mature DevOps were roughly 15 to 16% of the respondent base. So again, that number is taken from that, 15 to 16% of those respondents that identified as experienced.
Okay.
It's interesting too, and someone reached out to me with a private message. We're constantly living in this world of what's real and what's expectations, and kind of blurring the lines between those two. And I think in the same way, we also the lines get blurred between, are you practicing AI? Are you implementing AI yourself as part of your tool chain, as part of your workflow, or is it built into products that you're using, or are you just being told it's built into products you're using, but you don't really know? There's a whole spectrum of this that I imagine that, I wish we could get all those people back together on chat and say, now, which way did you answer this question? Right. So it's got to be in a mix of all this, but I would imagine a good portion of folks said, well, we bought this from vendor Y and they said they use AI, so it must be influencing what we're doing today to, hey, I'm spending my time working on it. So to me, that's where I kind of rationalize that. Maybe I'm over rationalizing it. You can argue that I am.
That's what analysts do, Mitch. we rationalize everything, but yeah, go ahead.
There you go. No, I was gonna say, you actually bring up a really good point, because I remember even just, a few years ago when you start looking at, especially AI became this buzzword for a lot of companies to get funding or to kind of pivot, for their brand new product. If I could just say I've got machine learning or AI, all of a sudden, wow, you got something new and interesting. And it's funny, I was looking at on page 14 of this report where we talk about how it's like, how are you using AI to augment your processes? And it says 49% say reduce test case maintenance with self-healing. Now, it's funny, so you talk about separating, fiction from, the actual real world. So when you think about self-healing, if you're looking at it from a UI perspective, there's some companies, in the past that have used that self-healing as from a UI perspective. They kind of look at it from the standpoint of, okay, is it truly AI, or did you just build an algorithm to handle some of these changes to the UI? Is it truly doing self-healing? So I think as individuals start to look at the technology and really understanding how much machine learning is actually being done, to understand what's real and what is not real. And I think that's huge for a lot of organizations. And I think there's so many companies that are just claiming AI, but there's only, in my opinion, that there are a select few that are actually doing some of these things. So when I think about self-healing, I think of it as doing more than just, okay, if a button changed, well, we've been able to figure that out 30 years ago, how to handle that, right? That's a very, very basic use case. What happens when the entire UI changes, or I remove that particular component, or something's happening? And that's just at the top level of UI level. So I think understanding what is real and what isn't plays a huge, huge part in how AI is really going to affect DevOps going forward. So let me give you guys opinion on that in terms of what you've seen out there that, outside of, what's real and what's not real.
Yeah, I feel like the practitioners closer to the ground are like that. They're looking for, they have this problem like that they are trying to solve, be it this they're like a low maintenance UI testing. And if it's like a powered by AI or algorithm or something else, it's like, it's not I feel like they don't really care all that much about it. If anything, like these developers are skeptical about stuff. They don't like this AI washing, and I feel that every day. So I feel like a healthy number of people would agree with you. But the other side, there's also another group in companies whose job is to kind of shore up the practice across the organizations. And they're opening the shoes, like they need to get more resources that they need to drive the effort. And sometimes like aligning themselves up in this, like what's going on broader in the industry or the world, in like help the management understands like the context of this. And if that translates to more people, money, the time for the practitioners on the ground, then all the power is to them. So I feel like that's part of what's happening. And sometimes when I hear like a developer shooting down these people because they're just a buzzword, I feel like, guys, like they're trying to help you, right? So don't shoot them down, at least in front of their boss, is kind of how I feel.
That's what marketing people are for. Shoot them. No, I'm sorry, Clint. I was not targeting anyone.
Let me turn off my camera.
Advocating violence. No.
Anyway, I'm gonna change my title from marketing.
There does seem to be a lot of kind of question just about what this whole mature thing looks like. So let me just kind of walk you through the definitions that we used for the purposes of again, self-identification, right? So we had 4 different levels, right? Getting started. So we were doing code reviews and have improved collaboration, dev test experience, and productivity. We have operationalizing DevOps, right? Practicing continuous integration and delivery, right? With automated builds and automated testing. Standardizing DevOps. We are practicing CI/CD with security testing integrated into the development lifecycle. So that looks a bit like DevSecOps. And then we've got mature DevOps, right? Cloud native, multi-cloud, flexible infrastructure as code. So those were kind of the terms that we used to try to get folks to, categorize and classify themselves from that standpoint. Is that perfect? No. Right? Did we need at least some level of categorization to try to get, interesting ideas about where folks were on that maturity curve? Yes. And if anybody out there has some suggestions for how we can refine that in the future, we are all ears, right? Because, we know that anytime you're kind of surveying a whole bunch of folks, there are going to be, some specific challenges that you have in terms of how you frame the questions. And again, we love feedback on that front because this is a moving target, right? Kind of where folks believe they are versus where they are. And then you get into, again, confirmation bias and ego and a lot of other psychology things that I don't know that we're digging into, in this specific episode of DevOps Unbound. But hopefully that gives everybody a little bit more context for, kind of what those definitions were.
Good. I think that's very helpful. That folks there's been running dialogue. If you aren't watching chat, please you can jump in there too about what do we mean by mature, especially given DevOps is such a journey, right? It's not a destination, if you will.
And it changes, right, Mitch? And again, we're being the senior members of the kind of panel here. I had said something about old before and I got lit up on the chat. So I'm not going to say that anymore. Like, there was experience. Somebody complimented my hair.
Seasoned.
Thank you very much. Right. That is very flattering. So thank you on that front. But, we've seen this before, right? We've seen a lot of these, technology things. We started, right, at least Mitch and I, started in mainframe land, right? And it gave way to client server. And you kind of saw how long it took for folks to really embrace that mentality. And then internet architecture and 3-tier applications happened. And it took, time. We were just getting comfortable with client server, like, the big fat clients. And then we're just like, oh, now we got to do this. Oh, am I allowed to say that? Okay. And then I was a fat family out. Now Cody's off of me. We got the explicit tag.
Family hour. Come on, buddy.
Well, we can have it. So, but we were just getting comfortable with the fat client, and now they're telling us we've got to split out, kind of the thin client and I guess the point is, right, we've seen this over and over again. There is an unequal, I think somebody put, Pareto's principle in there, right? 80-20. You're going to have 20% of the folks that, just run headlong into it. You've got 80% of the folks that are, somewhere kind of at the back end of that evolution from that standpoint. And it always takes longer. I always hearken back to that Bill Gates quote, right? You always overestimate the amount of progress you can make in 2 years, and you dramatically underestimate the amount of progress you can make in 10 years, right? And when we look back to what things look like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's astonishing. It really is astonishing in terms of, how quickly things do evolve and change. And we are clearly in that process relative to DevOps.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I see one of the challenges that I see even with a lot of our customers, because we serve, customers that are doing, modern software development, some that have very complex, legacy systems where they're still supporting the mainframe, those thick, fat clients. They still have, desktop applications, via Citrix and whatnot that they have to support. And they have all these integrations of packaged applications as well. Whether it's SAP, Workday, ServiceNow, Salesforce, and so forth. So the challenge that we're seeing with them in terms of implementing some sort of continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, even with some of those package applications, is that they still have to support a lot of the legacy side, as well as kind of move to the modern. And that kind of becomes more of the bottleneck versus just testing alone. So just trying to make sure that you can get that level of integration, get a certain amount of automation across the board. So what we kind of tell our prospects is we have to help them define DevOps on their terms, right? So if I try to do it the same way a AWS does it, or a Facebook does it, or a Silicon Valley startup, I may not be as successful. I can take some of those best practices. And so this is where I think AI is really going to help alleviate some of that, or machine learning, because you have all these various complex systems that are really slowing organizations down because they think, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. We've got the right folks in place. But yeah, we got all these legacy systems over here. We still have to maintain this. And we're trying to go cloud, trying to do cloud native, and we need to do this lift and shift and the whole nine. So it just gets a little bit more complicated. But But like you said, just seeing that evolution, and like we've been here before. We've seen this stuff since mainframe, back client, and distributed systems and so forth.
Someday, KK, you'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember we had this thing called Jenkins back then. It'll still be around." This part of your career. One thing I want to share, because I wanted to go into, we did this report, didn't focus just on testing, but we got some interesting data on testing I want to share. And I'm not really a name dropper, but I worked in a research organization, and there's a gentleman by the name of Bernardo Huberman, who was an expert in AI, one of the leading researchers. Only other name I know, by the way, is Marvin Minsky, and I never met him. But anyway, so and I asked him, "It's why is this surging? Why is this research? Why are we hearing so much about AI? Why is this really kind of looking like it's becoming real when it was supposed to be year after year after year?" And his response was, "It's there's a lot of advancement, but we especially see advancement in machine learning, and because of the massive quantity of data, that's what machine learning needs, is large and continuous feeds of data to look for those connections. It doesn't know that, this is a pixel move, and when that happens, that causes errors. It just knows that's a pattern that it sees in the data through kind of unstructured learning algorithms. And what better area? Operations is one great area. Testing is another great area where we get massive amounts of data, and especially in a DevOps world. Thank you, KK, for all the automation. We generate so much data, and I want to share just this one page, and no charts, just this one page. And I promise, I think we'll limit it to this. So, Mike, maybe you want to talk a little bit about kind of the automation side of this and some of the insights that we had.
Go down one more.
Oops, I'm sorry, I did pick the wrong page. Yeah. Yep, there we go.
Yeah, there it is. So we can kind of hone in or blow up on the a little bit. So
there we go.
So what we wanted to do was also dig in a little bit and try to understand kind of where in the testing process they found or expected the best or the most significant impact of AI. So we asked a fairly straightforward question. What types of testing are you struggling to automate? Right. And that's, kind of a place where we would think that, AI and some of the, other capabilities that kind of go along with DevOps would, kind of really help from that perspective. And, we saw, again, all, kind of fairly close, right. But functional testing and performance testing, really kind of jumping out from that standpoint. And then we also asked the companion question, and a number of folks in the chat are like, what is expectation and how you're defining AI and all that. And again, there's a lot of depth there and only so much you can get into in a SurveyMonkey, type of environment. But it was interesting in that, from an expectation standpoint, folks did believe that functional testing was going to, kind of have the great or benefit the most, from the introduction of AI into, kind of that testing process. So, from that standpoint, that's one where both folks had a problem automating and they believed that, AI was going to help. And then when you kind of look at the rest of them, they're all kind of the same, but you would think that UI would have been a little bit higher on that front. But, again, folks are kind of reflecting, what they think at any given time. So I thought that was kind of interesting data as well.
Yeah, this was also puzzling. Like I said, I thought today where things are used the most is this, emulating the behavior of humans, and UI testing in mobile browsers, stuff like that. So to see, even unit tests rank this high, I'm like what are you expecting, guys? And so this was, I don't know how to explain this really. Very different from my perception. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought, just based upon the results, that performance testing would have rated much higher. I think just because of the advancements in auto scaling and observability and a lot of the predictive analytics and things on the operations side. I figured something like that would rank much higher in terms of using machine learning to kind of anticipate what's what's coming or what's going to happen versus the other key areas. And I know some of these testing functions, depending on how you break them out, they can become very niche or specific in terms of skill set. So that might be part of the reason as well.
Yeah, and just along the lines of data is data, right? You draw the conclusions you can based upon that data, but there's, I think, a long history, and we carry these things around every day that kind of indicates that even when you ask folks what it is that they need and what they think is going to happen, they don't always understand, kind of what they're, going to need until they actually see it. So, again, we are kind of still dealing in the realm of, kind of potential and, kind of expectation from that, standpoint. So, we'll kind of caveat, the data from that perspective. And again, I think that both of your perspectives are extremely valuable, from the standpoint of saying, well, that's fine. Data is data, and there's 2,600 people that are saying that. This is my experience, right? I would expect it to be different because of this. I think that's significantly valuable as well.
Right. So perhaps like what they're thinking is more like what we are doing. So if you think about this like automating harder things to automate, then that's naturally more in the UI. But there are other things, use of AI in helping this DevOps or the testing in particular, and like the closer to my home ground is, okay, so you run all these tests, like which tests are more flaky, or like, what tests are worthwhile running for this change. And they're willing to use algorithms or AI or machine learning in these spaces. And arguably, these things are more useful closer to the depth where the frequency is high, like you want to run the higher amount of those and etc. So maybe these people are thinking about different kinds of AI assisted things.
Well, there was a point or question in the chat. People were asking, so what do you mean when you say AI? That's a pretty broad field. Like we deal with that in a lot of topics. I wonder also is oftentimes my observation is when you're at an inflection point when things are changing, or oftentimes when it's still early, there's a lot of confusion, right? And data also can contribute to that confusion of, this audience is saying one thing because they're coming out of an industry with a whole different experience than somebody that's living in startup land and building tools for developers or whatever it might be. And maybe we're still in the market hype cycle where it's still emerging, right? And no one is saying like, okay, we don't need testers anymore because it's all AI, which ain't never going to happen, by the way. Versus it's all flipping to something else. I think we're still in this emerging category. I mean, you can argue with me if you feel different.
No, I believe it's still definitely an emerging category, and it's starting to not only emerge but evolve as well, because you're seeing different companies implement it in different ways, and I look at it from the software quality side, because there are so many different areas that you can concentrate on. You look at just when we talk about security, security is a big one. You look at API microservices, contract testing, things of that nature. So there are so many different areas where you're going to see this explosion of AI. You look at it from the software development standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, helping developers write better code. So I think it's there to supplement or augment how we are doing things today. I think we're probably a ways away for it to be, kind of the takeover of the machine, so to speak. But but I think what we're seeing though is that there is a lot of promise in many of these technologies, and you're seeing the areas that you're getting more bang for your buck. Like we talked about self-healing, we talk about change impact analysis, understanding what has been touched on that system. So when I do execute those tests, I don't have to run through 50,000 test cases. I can just run through the ones that were affected. So now I can release faster. So we're starting to see a lot of the good come out of machine learning, as well as AI. But there's still a lot of areas where we're going to see massive improvement just across the board.
Very cool. I think that's maybe one question I'm often asked is, how do we tell when AI is real in somebody's product? And I just drilled down and said, ask specifically, where are you applying it and to what kind of problem? And usually you'll get to at least to a domain that will help you. And it's not like, we just turn AI loose on our data and it comes up with magical conclusions. Probably not, right? We're not there yet. I'm curious let's talk about where we think. So I think we're maybe all saying, yeah, we're still in this emerging category. And if you're a leader in DevOps, a leader on the software development team, maybe you're in management, et cetera. What do you think we should be focusing on as it relates to AI and our DevOps environment for the next, let's say, 24 months? Where should our focus be when we think about how we apply AI? Or should we worry about it? Just let the vendors do it. Koska, do you mind jumping in?
Yeah, sure.
You think about a lot of things. I want to hear what you're thinking about on this.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to pitch is like the software engineering should be more quantitative. And especially compared to what I see in like a sales and marketing becoming formal data driven, I feel like it kind of puts us in the shame that we are supposed to be the numbers and mass and rational people, but we are not. And then and I think that I feel like that's an easier pitch that to get the right, help the organizations give the right resources to you, and etc. etc. And then if you naturally progress on that data-driven approach, then I think it's only natural that the road will lead to AI, but that doesn't have to be like, yeah. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. Yeah.
Interesting. Clint.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with that, and I think for me, just as someone who speaks on this, on a regular, but just also really a fan, even though I work for a vendor and we're doing a lot of great things with, machine learning and AI, with Vision AI within our solution, but I'm seeing a lot of great solutions that are starting to emerge out there, even from the vendors. And I think as organizations look to build their CI/CD, best practices, how they can incorporate some of these. Like I mentioned before, like I said, I'm a huge fan of what KK is doing with Launchable, right? Because when you just look at the way they're talking about it, maybe I'm more a fan of the marketing side than the product, but but I love what they're doing, because it's really addressing a problem in terms of this is how AI is going to help DevOps in emergent, right? Because you're looking at that predictive analytics, you're looking at these different things. So one of the things that I see in terms of just the growth of this area is attacking real world problems is something that doesn't look like it's so far-fetched. Like I said, we're already seeing the effects of self-healing. We're seeing the effects of change impact analysis. We're seeing, a lot of these things, start to emerge within the software development community. So that's what I see when I look at these the various solutions in terms of what companies can do. I think if they start with I think the more tangible things that we can work with DevOps that are more realistic, which is what we're seeing with some of the companies that are on the market today.
I lied. I'm going to share a third part.
Hold on, Mitch. I want to.
You want to jump in? I'm sorry, Mike.
I do. And I think part of that is every organization has to get a sense of their ability to do a lot of custom integration. Right. In early markets, you are always going to have just a significant amount of the weaving together of all these different things falls on the part of the customer. So you have to have the skills, you have to have the capability, you have to have the understanding in order to really make all this stuff work together to impact your environment. And a lot of folks go into it and they're just like, oh, I can do it. And then they're like, oh, I can't do it. Right. And then, so being a little bit introspective up front relative about your own capabilities to do that is absolutely critical. right? Because the reality is the folks that can will, and they're starting to experiment now. They're building it themselves. They're leveraging their own, kind of algorithms. Maybe the vendors help them. Maybe they don't, right? It wouldn't be the first time that a customer's come and said, hey, I kind of, stitch this thing together. It seemed kind of interesting. And the architects of the vendor go, oh my God, right? And then they, kind of start and impact their own roadmap, based upon some of that customer-based innovation. If you fall into that category of, no, that's not us, right? We need to have this stuff packaged when it's ready, then you really focus on the outcomes, right? What outcome do I need? Do I have a problem in performance testing? Do I have a problem in functional testing? Do I have a problem in understanding, again, the data from the ops side to get a sense of what my deploys look like, or when I have, operational problems in the stack? That will drive you towards which of the solutions make the most sense if you need that packaged environment. If you don't, then you're just building what you need, right? But you've got data scientists to do that. So I don't want to lose that context, which is in every early market, you've got to decide whether you're a DIY type person or you need, kind of the thing to show up at Home Depot and you just kind of, it's a kit, right? And I think that's where folks need to get a sense of.
Yeah.
No,
Back in the days, a lot of people did that with the CI systems, and I know what happened to those.
Products, some go by the wayside. If the sentence starts out with, we built our own, fill in the blank, the kind of group you're working with, right? And folks do that, right? They necessity is the need for intervention, whatever the saying is. And I didn't mean to step on you, Mike, there. I wanted to just bring up this one part of the report just to maybe give some insights about where. Now, this question was related to where is AI being applied to, but I think these 6 areas, it's interesting, they aren't very far apart in terms of rating, where they come out in the report, but things like, identifying highest risk areas, automating test cases, self-healing. Clint, you've talked about that, root cause analysis, improvements that you can make, continuous measurement, stuff like that. So it's not, we're not trying to go to the moon right here with AI. That's pretty focused, I think, on maybe the software we're building is going to the moon, but AI, we're focusing on how do we make our software development better and improve our ability to deliver better software. So hopefully that's a view of pragmatism of how we're applying AI to this. Mike, you concur with my assessment of that?
I do. And I think that, again, it's important, for folks, especially if they have to do it themselves, to be very targeted at what problem am I trying to solve, right? That's kind of where you're having a hard time automating. That's where that question came from, right? So I think a lot of it is just that ethos of, being focused, being targeted, being discreet in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Because as you said, Mitch, we can't boil the ocean, at least not up front. So, you have to be very considerate relative to where you devote those very scarce resources that have the skills to do things like that.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up here, and it's been a fascinating conversation. And Mike, it's been fun participating with you on the research. You've been in the lead on this, and I've had a hand in it here and there. So it's been great working with you on that.
What Mitch is really saying is blame Mike if you don't buy into any of the research.
All the stuff you agree with is what I worked on. All the other, well. So, Kosuke, thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Launchable. And all the fun things I'm sure you're working on.
We'll be watching for sure.
Clint, great topic, and we appreciate all the world of experience you've had of you talking with customers and the product work that you're doing at Tricentis, and perfect fit for this panel. So I couldn't imagine 3 other fantastic people to do this work with, and of course my partner, Mike Rothman. So I want to say thanks to our friends at Tricentis who sponsor DevOps Unbound. You can catch our monthly roundtable, which is this format, just look at devops.com and the webinars that are coming up. You can also go to techstrong.tv And you will see, just scroll down a little bit there, you'll see DevOps Unbound as a category. You can find it in the series menu of video programs that we have on Techstrong TV. All the episodes that we have recorded for Techstrong about DevOps Unbound is on Techstrong TV, so enjoy that. And please download that report. Some great information. It's free. The work's been done. It's all packaged up. It's pretty consumable. I think there's not a lot of reading. There's a lot of visual content there too. So and we really appreciate your questions and engagement on chat. I'm not sure if any of us want to take on the quantum mechanics question.
KK, you're the smart guy, right? So maybe you know something about that.
Exactly.
Reach out to KK on his blog or something that none of us. So I can, all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we hope that you'll join us again for another DevOps Unbound, either a video series on techstrong.tv or here on devops.com webinars. We enjoy us again, and we wish you the best day. And good luck with your AI pursuits. Good luck with your DevOps pursuits. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
All right. Well, Clint, Kosuke, Mitch, Mike, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'd like to remind our audience that this session was recorded. So following this panel, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or you can find the recording living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars and just look in the on-demand section. So at the top of the hour, I promised we'd be giving out 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So our winners are Nancy R., Lori Z., Amelia S., and Prasanna G. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you do not see an email, just check your spam folder. So to our audience, thank you all so much for joining us today. Mitch has already thanked you, and I will thank you once more. But we do ask for one extra moment of your time to fill out a brief survey that will pop up on your screen here in just a moment. Otherwise, I think that is all we have for you today. We hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.
Good night.